Hello and welcome to this evening's session. I feel very lucky to be here today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to First Nations people, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to you all today. This is a really special place for me and for the team. We've developed this as a way of thinking about the future. It's an unashamedly optimistic space. We believe in KPMG Futures that our future is created by the actions we take each day. And this space is a space for us to think about and consider the opportunities that might emerge over the next decade if we step into those opportunities and make the decisions every day in order to meet them. My name is Peter Marion. I'm the Director of Foresight and Strategy in KPMG Futures. I'm joined by an amazing panel tonight to talk about the AI opportunity in the enterprise organisation. I don't want to talk too much in the beginning because I think the panelists are amazing and they're going to have far more interesting things to say than me. But to say that that there is a massive opportunity in this space, but it's also one that's incredibly challenging as well, because as we start to move through the AI opportunity, we're really thinking about how do we fundamentally reconfigure the way that we do business today? How do we change our cultures? How do we move out of things like pilot-itis and actually start to recognize ROI from these opportunities as well? And then also, how do we make sure that we're doing that in a way that meets our clients, stakeholders, employees' expectations around doing things in the right way? I'd like to introduce my panel. So I'd like to start off by introducing Damien Kasbadji, who is the CEO of the Tech Council of Australia, Andrea Jacks, who's a partner in KPMG Australia, Nicholas Flood, who is the Managing Director of IBM Australia, and Martijn Verbrey, who is the Chief Information Risk Officer at CBA. So to start off with, I'd like to get each of you to introduce yourselves and to maybe define enterprise intelligence in 2025 and maybe a little bit about where you see it heading for 2035. Damien, would you like to start?
Yeah, g'day, Damien Kasbadji here. I'm the CEO of the Tech Council of Australia. We represent around 180 members and partners across the country, 80% of which are founded here in Australia, all the way from Atlassian to Canva to earlier stage interesting startups like Harrison AI and Nira, and of course IBM who are on the panel with us, and we're honoured to have KPMG as a partner of our organisation as well. Really, I think enterprise is going to be the engine of the change, and when we look at the statistics, probably the most important part of the change. When we say that Australia is falling behind from an R&D and investment perspective, we're not saying the whole country is, because when we look at university investment, it's actually quite high. where their shortfall is in enterprise and large business in this country. And from our perspective, the biggest opportunity for AI in enterprise is fixing that gap of being 1% behind from a GDP perspective in Australia when compared to our OECD partners.
Hard act to follow. Hi everyone, Andrea Jacks, partner, AI risk lead. I'm pretty passionate about helping organizations build trust when deploying their AI capability. And that's through strong governance, risk and compliance. To answer your question, beyond just the interplay between data and tech and people, I think what we're seeing at a board level and an exec level is we're really asking the question, what can AI do for us today? And I suspect in 10 years' time, the question we'll be asking is, what can we trust AI to do for us? What decisions can we trust AI to make for us? So 10 years is going to be looking quite different, I think.
Absolutely. And Nicholas?
Hi everyone, my name's Nick Flood. I'm the CEO of IBM for Australia and New Zealand. I've got the great honour of working alongside 3,500 employees distributed across both fantastic nations. Peter, to answer your question, which was how do you define enterprise intelligence? Like all of us, my answer is informed by my background. I joined IBM as a graduate 16 years ago. And in answering that question, I really see three different epochs around enterprise technology. When I started as a graduate, the conversation with our clients and partners was really what happened. So how do you instrument and introduce technology to help them understand how they were tracking against their KPIs, how they could have a greater view as to what happened in the prior reporting period. About midway through my career, things shifted and the buzz was all about predictive, and clients wanted to know how could technology tell them what was going to happen, and that was really exciting. In the current epoch, it's all about tell me what is happening. Let me illustrate that through two really cool examples. So at the beginning of this year, IBM became a technology partner to the Scuderia Ferrari Formula One team. So I had the good fortune of going to the Melbourne Grand Prix, talking in depth with Ravan Jain, who's this brilliant Oxford-educated mathematician who's now the chief race strategy engineer. He's now looking around how can technology tell him what is happening, what tweaks can he make in real time to optimise performance. In an enterprise setting, let me illustrate that through a government example. So governments, often those that are making big payments to welfare recipients or those on schemes such as the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, the workflow in those organisations was let's make the payment, let's then look retrospectively to identify areas of fraud or misuse, and then let's correct that retrospectively. Right now, the conversation around enterprise intelligence is let's apply that intelligence to the transaction while it's occurring and stop it before it being processed. So, Peter, to answer the question, I really define enterprise intelligence today differently to what I described it as around tell me what is happening in my business right this second.
Absolutely. Martijn?
Wow. So Martijn, I look after cybersecurity for the bank. So my job is to keep the bank safe and our customers safe from all sorts of attacks, AI enabled or not. In terms of enterprise intelligence and AI, we are trying to work out what we want it to be, really. And our approach as a bank is very much let's do lots of experiments and let's find out, because I don't think there's one way to answer the question. So we do tons of, we almost democratized it. So we give our colleagues the tools to make life better for our customers and for ourselves. Trial, fail fast, and yeah, my job is then to run after them to make sure we do it safely and securely. Yeah, that's probably in a nutshell where we are, and I can tell a bit more about that.
I think we're in a similar boat at KPMG. I think John Munnelly keeps pointing out that I'm on some of his lists, that he's watching the work that I'm doing with AI tools at the moment. So, Nick, IBM has been part of every major technology wave. From your vantage point, what's different about AI compared to other past enterprise transformations like the cloud or automation and things like that?
It's a great question. It's really the level of enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm's not around developers, it's not about CIOs, it's broad spread from top to bottom of all of the wonderful organisations that we face. And I'm an optimist. I loved how you framed up the beginning and you set the context. I think that smart people with that enthusiasm can do wonderful things. To answer the question, it's the level of enthusiasm and evangelism across all lines of business, all jobs, all levels of seniority within the organisation, to me, which makes AI fundamentally different to other transformational technology shifts.
Absolutely. And Martijn, I was wondering, how do we balance the speed of AI adoption with the need for trust, compliance and resilience in really highly regulated industries such as finance?
Yeah, that's probably I spend the majority of my day on that. We have said we don't want to slow AI down. Not doing anything with it is probably a bigger risk for us than doing something with it. So that's probably our fundamental principle. We're learning by doing, and that's as simple as it is. So we have what we call a big red team. A red team is basically a team of hackers, and we try to break the AI models that we develop. We have done about 90 red teams on 90 models since January, to give you a bit of an idea of the scale of this, and I still think I'm only seeing the tip of the iceberg here. By actually seeing the models in action, trying to break them, trying to get them to talk about something they're not supposed to talk about, trying to get them to post some information over there or hallucinate, that's how we're learning. And then we basically grab the teams together and like, okay, what can we actually do about this? So we're having a lot of dialogue actually with the big model providers themselves, like, hey, you need to improve this, how can we do this? And every time, we're still at the point where we want to go to autonomous models, where they can do things themselves, but I think we're not quite there yet. We still have almost always the requirement of a human oversight over it. So things are non-binding, informative, but yeah, we're still a little while off where we complete from the point where we can say, yep, this model is going to work all the time, every time.
One of the interesting conversations that I've had, we've been hosting a number of tours through this space over the last couple of days, and one of the interesting conversations I've had with a number of different people actually, and they've brought it up, is that a lot of their staff keep trying to break the AI models like you've just been discussing here, but when they find that they've broken them, then that then means that they don't want to use them anymore because they've proven that they're incorrect. So how do you create a culture around, yes, you are trying to red team things, but then you then build around them to make them safe again?
Yeah, it's really funny. Because a lot of our models, particularly the prompt injection and then the answers, the input-output validation is super important. Because that's so. When we test these models, we try to get them to talk about fruit. So think about some agent that's supposed to help you with a mortgage process. Our job is done. Let's see if we can get it to talk about papayas and lemons and so on. And what we do is we then put safeguards in. We call them guardrails that test the inputs and also make sure that these models don't start talking profound language and so on. So we test the output. But it becomes a real cat and mouse game. But then, because we log the prompts and we sort of analyze them in real time, I asked a question to the team that looks at this. It's like, hey, what do you see? Oh yeah, there's a bit of abuse going on. Like, who's doing this? Where's it coming from? Oh, it's all coming from your team. So we seem to be our people that seem to break him at this point. Most users are actually absolutely adopting it and using it for real good reason. But we always know that this is how the internet happened as well. 90% of it is great, 10% baddies. And in this case, it's us. We're trying to break our own models. So I think we haven't seen that as much. We are rolling out ChatGPT for everyone, and trying to get everyone to embrace it. And people are now coming to the point like, oh, it does generate a bit of slop as well, and that sort of sees people either stop using it or just getting much better at their prompting. And this is purely the agent that helps you create text, generative AI. I'm not talking about the agentic yet, but yeah. So I think we're okay for now.
And Andrea, as AI adoption accelerates, what are the biggest compliance blind spots that you're seeing in enterprises right now?
Compliance blind spots. I think ultimately the governance will always lag the capability, especially when it comes to AI risk. If I think about something like data risk or cyber risk, we've come a long way, and I see some nodding heads. AI risk is quite different, and the compliance of AI risk is going to need to be different because the output's different. And so the way in which you measure, monitor, manage, and report on it is something new for traditional compliance teams and frameworks. A few blind spots that I think will be coming to fruition is one being accountability. I'm already seeing CTOs say to me, I don't want to own that risk. I don't want to be accountable. Fair enough. But fundamentally, you can't put a model in front of a board. You can't put a model in front of a regulator in time. So someone's going to have to own it. The second blind spot, I would say, is adaptive controls, continuous controls monitoring, continuous assurance. So this idea of what do we need to help support real-time monitoring of AI, given that the risk profile is so different. And then the last one, which is probably more of a hot topic in financial services, and that's third-party risk. So simply put, you might be unknowingly outsourcing your compliance risk. So if your vendors and suppliers and whatnot are leveraging different types of AI capability, you might not realize it. And if I think about financial services, CPS 230, and there's more demand for that explainability and visibility.
On Andrea's third point, that really resonated. We work very closely, I work very closely with a lot of senior federal government CIOs. And it was interesting, there was regulation passed that mandated that every federal government agency has to appoint an officer responsible for AI. Many of those agencies, their assumption was, oh, this will be easy, we haven't turned the tap on any AI. But when they did an audit, they were shocked, Andrea, to find that there was multiple models that were already running across their enterprise, many of which had actually been add-ons or additions to existing enterprise technologies that were in place.
That's spot on. Wow.
And Damien, how is Australia positioned to compete in the global AI economy, and what policy or infrastructure gaps do you see holding us back?
Yeah, so we're not really playing in the LLM world. I think that's very obvious, but I don't think that's necessarily the only game. You know, we've mentioned agentic AI, but there's also very, very specific solution-based technologies coming out of Australia that we are leading in. Look, frankly, Atlassian is a big fish here. They are, invested, nearly $2 billion in thinking about AI and, reshaping the way browsers work and, within their own systems. Canva's bought Leonardo AI and is probably one of the leaders in imaging technology, and has worked out ways to compensate some of their creators who input into that. But when we think about interesting and emerging areas, we punch above our weight in areas that we've had a tradition of innovation in. And when we look at, for example, energy technology, we were fast adopters of solar because we obviously have a lot of sun here and we have a lot of energy tech capabilities. And when you think of an organisation like NERA, they are literally making the energy grids more efficient using AI tools, and we're selling that to California and Texas. Harrison AI, similarly on digital imaging when it comes to radiology and helping doctors and radiologists identify disease better than a human eye can. Wow. And more importantly, or as importantly, treat more patients and reduce waiting time. So these are the kinds of things that we're seeing emerge. If we're to look at a macro perspective, I think the bad news is that our vibrancy here on AI isn't as strong as it could be. And that's an opportunity. But when you think just 10 years ago, there wasn't really a significant VC market in Australia. There is now. And so our expectation is that that will grow over time if we're fostering that innovation. But to ensure that that is being fostered, we need a number of capital sources that are thinking about the long-term investment here. And one of the issues that we see that we work on a lot is how to think about getting more superannuation funds. We've got $4 trillion worth of savings in this country into our segment. So I said, our VC kind of system wasn't really in existence in the way it is now only 10 years ago. It is, we have $4 to $6 billion invested in startups and early stage investment in this country. If you would think about 1% of superannuation, that's $40 billion. So it's 4 or 5 times the size of our VC capital. That's because we have trained through government regulations superannuation funds to think about liquidity and how to think about the lowest fees, not think about long-term reward and return for customers, which when you look at it, our VCs have returned better results than the stock market have over the last decade. So from our perspective, there are things that regulators can do to unlock it. We're excited about what's emerging in Australia. We think we're going to be more in that next layer, agentic AI, the product space. We're not too worried that we have to always compete on the LLM space, but from our perspective, there is a question around investment here and ensuring that we have, capable investors who are thinking about the long term.
And I think one of the interesting things that's come out of some of those conversations that we've had, even in a panel last night, was how cheap it is to invest in Australian innovation compared to investing in other countries. Do you agree?
So, yeah, look, I mean, when US companies work out the talent that there is in Australia, the kind of people that they can attract to Australia, and the cost per head compared to, say, San Francisco, it is very, very attractive. Block, for example, runs its engineering unit for Cash App, which is a product not available in Australia, out of Melbourne. So their engineering centre for a product that is used by 60 million Americans is run out of Melbourne. So these are the kinds of opportunities there are, and this kind of cross flow between Australia and the US does kind of get us at the result. So the other thing that has happened in Australian tech and the maturity in Australia that I believe is very interesting is, for the first time over the last few years, we're seeing global talent being able to run things out of Australia. So Atlassian and Canva have taught Silicon Valley that no, you can run global functions out of Australia. Australia is always seen as a place where you would just run the Australian business and just manage that business. Whereas what we're starting to see now is companies think about Australia as a place that they can potentially run some of their global units.
Great. And I might open the next question to the full panel, but what lessons have we already learned from early enterprise AI adoption, both successes and failures?
I think so. Our model that we're implementing is very much AI for everyone. That is basically just your AI companion. In our case, that's ChatGPT and Copilot. You can use both. That's now spinning off and people creating their own agents on those platforms. So little bot that helps you go through your email, plan your day, and so on. And we're training people to do that and how to use that and clever prompting. Then the journey is now starting really on agentic, and that's I think where we're going to see much bigger yields. We yesterday actually across the road at South by Southwest, my colleague talked about our threat hunting agent that we have. Basically, it scans 24/7 for vulnerabilities in our entire network, and that's working surprisingly well. They work 24/7 all the time. They provide meaningful outputs, and yeah, that's going somewhere. And I think the discussion that we're having now is like, well, if we can get that agent talk to the CTO's agent who do the patching, they can just work them out the priority and how they're going to fix things, and that's just internally. What if they can talk to our suppliers and so on? So suddenly the light bulb moment goes off, and I've never seen anything like this where there's so many good ideas coming out. We obviously still need to do it, but yeah, that's sort of our journey been. So I think it's been successful, and that's why we're still going all in with this.
In terms of how you're thinking about this, sorry, I will come back to everybody else and continue this question thread, but there's a follow-up question I wanted to ask around this, which is you're looking at the agentic piece and the AI piece from a number of different angles. How much of that, obviously, you're talking about this from a technological development perspective, people have come up with ideas for agents and things like that, but then how much are you thinking about, well, the process then that underpins all of those things then needs to be different?
Yeah, it gets redrawn. It gets redrawn, and often it comes back to data. Have we got access to the right data? How do we provide that data to the agent so it can make autonomous decisions? Because that's probably the difference. The first two levels, this is really AI for everyone and your own agent. They support you in your task. Agentic is when it becomes autonomous. And the first one is when one agent does one thing, and then we start talking about groups of agents working it out amongst themselves. So that's sort of where we're trying to get to for very specific use cases. But yeah, it changes the process, it changes the data structures, it changes almost everything that comes around it.
And Nick, I'm just going to jump back to the question that we were discussing a second ago, which is what lessons have we already learned from early enterprise AI adoption, both successes and failures?
What I see is that the most enterprise value is being created when clients architect themselves to be multi-model, so that they can draw from innovations across a whole range of fronts rather than from one individual provider. I also see the best organisations doing it in a way that's blending very large language models for specific use cases, and then on the other hand using small, specifically tailored language models for other use cases. when we play this out 5 years in the future, and when you contemplate millions, tens, hundreds, billions of queries hitting those LLMs, that's where organisational advantage will really start to hit. As those smaller, more focused language models that aren't encumbered with all of the unnecessary information have a cost of inference a fraction of the very large language models. So that would be the recommendation that I've seen the leading organisations in this space already pursue to great benefit.
In terms of the ones that we've seen do well is probably organisations that have the ability to build trust and really quickly. I always say trust is the currency of AI adoption. So if you can build trust quickly, your boards will back you, your clients and your teams will adopt it, and in time the regulator also will not need to step in. So building that trust. And I'm not sure if this question will come, but there's a lot of focus on at the moment in terms of how do we get our pilots up and running, or our POCs, proof of concepts. So there's quite a bit of focus on being able to operationalize AI capability, because fundamentally ROI is measured on things that are being operationalized, not in the experiment land. So there's a few things that we've seen that work quite well for organizations, and being a risk person, number one would be having strong governance, risk, and controls at the start of your AI capability lifecycle. So everyone knows what the boundaries are off the bat, and there's no unknowns, is being quite helpful. I also think, and I hope I'm not stepping over an ROI type question, but...
it's coming, but that's okay.
Is it coming?
We can jump in.
I'll leave it there. Let's wait for the proper question. I'm a bad panelist. Thank you.
Cliffhanger, yeah.
Okay, we can adapt. We can move forward. Damien?
Well, why don't we start going with the ROI?
Okay, let's jump into the ROI question.
Yeah, because from a macro perspective, that's, and that's what we look at. But from what we see from an adoption perspective, our own startups, it's kind of, they're in the 80 percentile range of adopting AI and using it. When we look at enterprise, it's more like in the 60% range. So there is certainly a gap there from a macro perspective, which is interesting. But the ROI is significant. Those that are using AI are seeing not only significant productivity gains, like sometimes 5 times more productivity, they're also seeing increased revenue per head count. And one of the statistics out there is that there is, when we start using AI, the efficiency per head count also means that there's obviously more revenue per person. One of the things we have tracked over the years is efficiencies of engineers, and it's interesting when it comes to disruption that the tech sector disrupts itself quite quickly and not on its own. But an engineer now using AI tools is something like 120% more efficient than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. So just think about a single person's output. Well, therefore, of course, that's not just productivity. That means more revenue for a business per head count, just thinking about that one person's efficiency because of the tools that they're using.
Nick, you have some amazing stats on how the costs and the operational benefits that you've been able to generate through AI. So why don't you talk about that? Because I guess you are the shining example of an organisation that is generating ROI from AI and automation tools.
I had the good fortune of talking to Andrew and the KPMG NEC at a recent offsite about this. I'll set the scene. IBM's current president, chairman and CEO is a gentleman called Arvind Krishna. Unlike his predecessors, back to our founding 114 years ago, Arvind didn't come from our sales and relationship management function. Arvind came from IBM Research, which is the largest applied science organisation on the planet, and he brings a technical perspective to his leadership. When he became CEO, he said, we can't have credibility if we're not client zero for our technologies. And we have the aspiration to be the most efficient company on the planet. So Arvind's unlocked $3.5 billion of cost savings since he was appointed 2.5 years ago through the application of AI on our own business. One of the examples that's really amazing is an agentic AI platform called Ask HR. So we have about 400,000 employees around the world. Historically, those 400,000 employees were all served through an army of managers, and each of those managers were supported through a HR partner. With the agentic AI platform called Ask HR, employees are now servicing about 98% of all of their own HR queries in an agentic AI platform that's consistent across a whole number of different SaaS applications. So no longer does an employee need to be an expert in success factors if they're changing their job title or applying for leave. If they're acquitting their expenses in Concur, they don't have to become a Concur expert. There's a consistent user experience delivered through the agentic AI Ask HR agent that all employees across the organisation are benefiting from, and that's been one of the drivers of such significant cost savings. The one recommendation from my observation around why that's been a success is that Arvind himself insisted that no one could opt out. So historically, organisational change initiatives like that would be rolled out. If you were a certain seniority, you would believe that, okay, that doesn't apply to me. But Arvind has insisted that everyone, himself included, use Ask HR rather than going to his HR partner.
Talk to the bot.
Yeah, talk to the bot. He uses a really funny anecdote. He said that one of his children was leaving home and was applying for his first rental property when he went to pursue his postgrad studies. And as part of the rental application, he had to get a letter from his dad or his family about their income to make sure that he could get the lease okay. And Arvind says that he went to Ask HR, asked it to create a statement about his salary, and I can only imagine the shock that would have been on the real estate agent's face when they got that letter. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure. But I mean, there must be more to so there's so many, when sort of new technological innovations get rolled out within organizations, one of the things that we talk about is often that the benefits of those aren't fully achieved because of, the human factor, right? It becomes very hard to create change in culture, in behaviors. And then often what happens is that, some of the other parts of the job expand out and you don't actually realize those benefits. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you've actually managed to achieve those benefits?
Yeah, so it's all about how do we use AI to empower higher value work. So this hasn't been an initiative about broad sweeping restructures and redundancy programs. It's about getting really smart people that we recruit and we retain in the company to unburden them from the low value work and point them toward higher value activities. So for example, in the HR case, we have such an amount of free time being freed up because no longer is the HR partner processing leave requests or doing promotions from one band to the other. They're actually now empowered and they have the time to focus on broad sweeping cultural initiatives, engagement activities across the team, coaching activities to make the entire workforce more productive. I do think, Peter, that was a key way that the organisation got buy-in, that it wasn't characterised as a cost-saving initiative. It was around how do we transform the way that work is undertaken.
And I guess those are pretty much areas that most people would like to get less time spent on those things.
Indeed, absolutely.
And Martijn, can you take this sort of line of questioning from your perspective? Like, how do large organisations avoid pilotitis when it comes to things like AI? How do you make sure that you're realising the benefit from those investments and the efforts that you're putting in those spaces?
Yeah, I think we're mostly about the I at the moment because we're still working out what it can do for us. And I think that's why all these experiments are going on at the moment. The R and the ROI is something that I'm sure we're going to face into in the next 12 months as well. Like, what is actually the return for all of this stuff? I think the R, I'm worried about the R because I think price is going to go up of compute. I think we're now heavily being subsidized by the OpenAIs and they're all passing the same $20 around themselves, amongst themselves. So I think pricing has to change, and it cannot go in one way up, and that suddenly brings the ROI in a very different perspective. So yeah, I don't know how it's going to pan out, but we see models that are like, oh, that was a nice experiment. It didn't really work, did it? No, it didn't really work, and then we just kill it off, and it will never see the limelight again. But there's a few that are absolutely promising, and we're trying to work out what are the ones that really. So in my own function, we're about cybersecurity. We're using it to do our job better, not so much efficiency. We're finding more security holes than we would have found with our current workforce. So it's helping us to protect the bank better in a way, and that's a really big tick. And I can't express it in money really what it means for us. It means it's doing a much better job. The efficiency is a secondary point at the moment, and I think a lot of it is very much around efficiency still. And I think how can we actually do things better in the first place? So.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm really excited about in terms of implementing AI tools is not just the productivity equation, but it's actually what are the new things that
better
you can
outcomes.
do. Better outcomes.
Yep.
How do you get to a better outcome? What are the new things that we can all do? But to continue my line around the sort of attack piece, can you sort of speak to a little bit around what new attack surfaces or vulnerabilities that businesses should be preparing for as AI is becoming more and more advanced?
Okay. Here we go. So the primary piece that we're all focusing on is the interface itself. And when we talk about generative AI, it's a chat window. And because we're throwing human language at this, you can't just distinguish data from programming language anymore. And what we're learning is that these models are inherently probabilistic. They make educated guesses of what the answer should be and what you want to see and how to interpret it. That also means if you take a really extreme view, if you ask a model often how many times, an unlimited amount of times, how much is 2 and 2, at some point it will say 5. So you can't predict the outcome, and that's what I'm learning even with my own ChatGPT that we're doing. Like I get a different outcome every time I put in the same prompt. So there's that non-deterministic part that we're missing. So that's probably risk one. So getting different outcomes, even though nothing has changed. So that's probably one. Then the prompting injection itself, so getting it to talk about stuff it shouldn't be talking about. Give me all the salary information from everybody that works for the bank is a nice example. And you'll be surprised how easily you can still persuade these generative AI models to give it up to you. So that's one. When we go and talk to agentic, this is where it gets really interesting, because that means you need to give models access to data. We're using protocols called MCP, Model Contracts Protocol. My joke is that the S in MCP stands for security. And but Martijn, there's no S in MCP. Correct. So we're giving these models access to almost everything that we want to feed it. So think about our entire Office 365 landscape, Atlassian, our customer databases perhaps. But it also means that these models need to treat that securely. So how do we protect those interfaces and the data that goes into those models, and how to make sure that nothing goes wrong with the output? So the attack surface in a nutshell has gone up exponentially. You mentioned the third parties. Most of our SaaS providers that we use, they're switching on AI models in the background. We can connect to it. You can connect to fourth parties with a radio button in there as well, and we've got no control over that because suddenly we're dealing with a fourth party through, say, Salesforce that we know nothing about. That keeps me up at night. The attack surface is going exponentially. We go from limited risk, 0 risk, to 100 risk really quickly.
Martin, there's one other that I've seen that was very scary in our context, and it was around the social side and the social threats that exist. Let me expand. One of my counterparts that runs another market got a WhatsApp message with the audio recording, and it was the audio recording of our CEO's voice, and the CEO's voice was, I'm running an acquisition. This channel is being monitored by the SEC. I'm unable to speak verbally while we're running this acquisition. So that's why I'm sending you a recorded message. The voice had been composed to be a mirror image of the CEO's voice. And it was very lucky that we have controls and division of responsibilities in the company, as the person who received that voice message was acting on the CEO's instruction and was about to wire a down payment for a fictitious acquisition to a company based on what they believed to be the CEO's immediate instruction.
If I can expand on that one,
Yeah.
so that's what we're. We announced it probably a month or two ago. So we have got a few thousand bots that answer scammer calls. So we've probably all been contacted by a scammer in your life, someone who tries to persuade you to get some details that you should be giving, and ultimately it results in a payment. What we're doing is we have lists that we get from the known scam numbers. When we see them pop up, we connect them to our bots. And basically, you'll hear we got a cross section of the demographics. You've got Aussie Bruce that will answer the call, and the challenge is to keep the scammer on the phone call as long as they can before they work out they're talking to an AI, not Gladys, the grandma.
Martin, how long has been the duration that you've achieved?
57 minutes is the longest duration that we kept the scammer on a call, and that's a good thing for society, right? Because every hour that we keep him on the call, and we've got 1,000 of them taking these calls, it means they can't talk to a real Australian.
That's great.
So yeah.
This is a real social good that you're doing here.
I'll give you one of the numbers. You can open that chat if you want.
I might start putting it as my answering machine number. So that there's,
we've got a demo. You can probably find it on YouTube, but if you search it, but it's a very funny demo.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Andrea and Damien, what's the right balance between innovation and regulation, and how do businesses avoid compliance becoming a handbrake on AI progress?
Good question. I mean, I've got this is the AJ view, that AI regulation will always be one step behind the innovation. So the organizations that are able to self-govern quicker than they are regulated are probably the ones that will come out on top. In terms of the handbrake side of it, it's going to be a tough one, but similar to the blind spots, if you can make sure that you have your risk functions along the journey, the teams that really get regulations cross the lines of defense as part of the conversation. When things go in to be operationalized, there's no real surprises. Because these teams in your organizations have a good understanding of not just the design effectiveness of these AI capabilities, but they'll be able to really test and question it being implemented and embedded. And so they will really be questioning the operating effectiveness of it, which all provides assurance, which provides trust, which provides adoption of AI.
I certainly agree in relation to self-regulation. Like, all disruptive industries need to think about very carefully what are the safeguards, what are the public expectations, and the companies that have succeeded have thought about how to do that first. And my strong belief is that Uber nearly crashed, but because it started thinking about solving some of the regulatory issues for government, that's when it started succeeding. It started having very, very sound arguments around, is it that government is worried about pricing that is not fixed, or is it that you want transparency around that? Is it that you're uncomfortable about a private driver giving someone else a lift, or is it that you want some simple licensing regime for that driver? So, having worked in the tech world, I think these are very simple concepts in relation to what is government's intention. And for the most part, as a tech council, we are not saying in any way at all that privacy laws, impersonation laws, copyright laws, and other areas should necessarily be changed because of AI. That is not what we're saying. I think regulators need help in understanding how to implement those laws in the context of an AI world. I think the other part here is regulators need to be careful in relation to the message they send to the marketplace for Australia as it sits in a global scheme. And we're kind of proud that over the last 6 months we have seen at least now a different rhetoric coming out of the federal government that is more optimistic about the opportunities. And that is, by no mistake, something that, people in this room enterprise as well as the tech sector and the business leaders saying there is an opportunity here. There's a jobs opportunity. We expect at least 200,000 people working directly in AI by 2030. This is going to be fundamental to Australia's GDP and productivity. This is going to be fundamental to our export capability if we get our piece of the pie. So it has been a job of educating government, getting that rhetoric right in relation to, yes, there are risks, but let's work on those risks together, bed them down so we can focus on the opportunities.
I really liked what you had to say there about figuring out what the actual problem is from the government perspective rather than, just worrying about it just blowing out. My last section before we move into audience Q&A, we might have maybe space for 1 or 2 questions, is to really start to think beyond AI and beyond and what's next. And I wanted to talk a little bit about quantum just briefly. How should organizations be approaching quantum, and what are your companies doing in the space today? Martijn, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, happy to. Look, we're doing experiments with it. We've got a few quantum rigs, if you like, where we try to work out what can we use it for. Because I think quantum, everybody talks about this thing called Q-Day. That's basically the day when the baddies can crack all our encryption with a quantum computer, and we have to replace all that. So that's obviously my big worry. But yeah, we're doing experiments with it, but it's very small scale compared to the AI wave that we're riding, to be honest. I think it is coming in 5-6 years' time. We know that Q-Day will be there, so we need to make sure that we can replace all the existing, what we call asymmetric encryption algorithms that we use with the ones that are quantum proof. The problem that we have is that I can't buy an appliance that is quantum proof yet today. So we're waiting for the algorithm to trickle down to the vendors to be there at scale. So what we're doing is we're making an inventory of all our encryption keys, all the stuff we need to replace. So 2 things really. So we're experimenting in terms of what can it do in terms of benefits. And I don't think we're talking enough about that as an industry. And then how do we then protect ourselves for Q-Day, which is my job.
Very similar. It's funny, from the vendor side to the client side, we're approaching it along the 2-pronged strategy like you described. So firstly on quantum utility is path 1. You've got wonderful examples that are starting to emerge. For example, HSBC last week, they published a study that's demonstrating that their traders have a quantum advantage. They're earning more in comparison to the traders that are relying upon the supercomputers that are classical in nature rather than quantum by design. So we're seeing on that far right-hand end of the continuum around quantum utility, these wonderfully powerful use cases starting to emerge with quantum. I think more of the clients, though, are on the far left of that continuum, and what we're recommending is that they lift their organisational understanding of quantum and they do some kind of accelerator to emerge or submerge a whole range of their leaders so that they understand what quantum computing is and that they have a method to be able to understand what a use case in their context that could benefit from quantum could be. On the second front, that's really interesting. We've all got to thank a Californian mathematician called Peter Shaw. Peter Shaw came up with, apparently one afternoon, an algorithm that renders obsolete with sufficient computing power all of the world's current approaches for cryptography. The barrier for that to become a threat, though, was the power of classical computing capability. With quantum computing and then Shaw's algorithm, regrettably, all of the asymmetric cryptography methods that the world uses today are obsolete. Now, what is the scary scenario is that it's not just nations with positive intent that are now getting their hands on quantum computers. They're proliferating. Nefarious actors that want to use it for their own gain are now emerging. And there is a race to embrace quantum-safe cryptography standards. The US administration are really leading the charge here. NIST, which is the national agency responsible for those methods, now has published quantum-safe algorithms. But to Martijn's point, all critical industries, all enterprises around the world now have to undertake this race to be prepared for Q-Day and to be prepared to have these quantum-safe cryptography standards in place prior to that day.
Andrea?
agree with the quantum literacy. Probably the number one thing us as a firm are being asked at the moment is, can you come and explain to whether it's boards or execs or right down to the cyber domain levels, what is quantum? Is it here? Is it an emerging risk? To your other point, a very hot topic at the moment is that concept of harvest now, decrypt later. So we've been asked quite a lot on what does this look like? How do we embed a potential quantum type strategy into our current cyber strategies? What is the risk? How do you define it? All the good stuff. So when we start to build out things like roadmaps and strategies and what is the playbook for this, it's aligned to what we're doing already as a business. And then also the hard question of, if it does come to fruition, what parts of our business do we feel like maybe we're not going to risk accept it and we need to close down? And those type of conversations, which is always fun and games.
More a macro perspective, but great that we're talking about something else except AI. But quantum is a great example of early government intervention in Australia. 30 years ago, seeding funding at our Australian universities to have a focus on quantum. It has bared fruits. We have people like Michelle Simmons, who's come over to Australia specifically to work on silicon quantum, one of Australia's, the Australian of the Year. We have seen out of that early investment and production from universities that are now just starting to commercialise because it's such a long-term investment, that we outsize the proportion of startups in the quantum space by two. So when we look at our global proportion of quantum computing startups in Australia versus startups in general, it's twice as large. So we are well, above average and punching above weight because of the early investment there. And I think it's an exciting space for Australia, and it's very interesting to see that the business models emerging and seeing how businesses are thinking about uptake of it.
Just to reinforce that, Damien, so it's wild to think, like right here in Sydney, for example, at the Australian Centre for Quantum Growth at the University of Sydney, their innovations are being exported to agencies like IARPA, the Intelligence Applied Research Agency in the US.
Yeah.
So the most bleeding edge, demanding organisations on the planet are looking here to Australia for our thought leadership and our innovations.
100%.
Yep.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a quick plug to our quantum team, which is part of KPMG Futures, and they are actually developing quantum code here in Australia and figuring out what quantum problems to solve. But I'd also like to open the floor to questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please stick your hand up in the air and make yourself known to us. Christiana,
Slightly different question, but in a world where we'll be interacting with customers A to A, agent to agent, where do you see the future of customer-facing channels and interactions going? Do they disappear? How do we enable them? What's the tech stack going to be behind that?
What's the interface going to be, right? That's the quick question. And my joke is always, have you seen the movie WALL-E where we all end up? No, I think the question is it's going to be an agent-to-agent interface, but into what? And look at from us, we're trying to work out where we sit in that. So if you ask your personal agent to buy you a book somewhere and it goes off and uses your credit card to buy a book somewhere, maybe somewhere dodgy, where do we as a bank have a role to play? Because at some point a transaction will need to be made. So where in that customer journey will you get your pop-up from, in our case, the CBA apps, like, hey, your agent is about to make a $2,500 purchase for this book in this really dodgy website. Are you sure you want to proceed? So that's really what we're trying to wonder, like where it's going to change the interface completely, but into what, really? And where's the human intervention in there? So I don't know, maybe a disappointing answer to your question, but...
Just wanted to see if anybody has any idea.
Yeah, the customer journey is... we're doing a lot of customer journey mapping around this, and the idea is to remove screens and don't ask what we already should know and so on, and then there's little left. But it will be all about the trust, like you can rely on us to make sure that the payment goes to the right place, and you're paying a real merchant and not a fake one, and you're really paying $25, not $2,500.
Can I encourage you to go and have a look at some of our exhibition upstairs? We've got an exhibition that looks at the future of the user interface, which is looking at how that might transition into the future.
I think it changes rather than disappears, to answer your question. So what came to mind is I sit on the board of the University of Sydney, and they've had a crisis moment. They're saying, what do we do in this era of AI? Do we ban it? Do we try and embrace it and include it in our curriculum? And Mark Scott, who's the Vice-Chancellor, he is really got an interesting point of view. And he's like, well, AI, yes, it kind of diminishes the need to retain knowledge, but at the same time, it increases the need to have higher level cognitive and thinking skills. You need to have an ability to detect bias, for example, and to understand if something has got a predetermined perspective that you should be aware of. So I think it's going to change the nature of customer service as opposed to diminishing or removing it.
I think maybe we have time for one more question. So if you have one, the gentleman in the back there.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. I just have a question. You were talking about self-governing, so that a company shouldn't wait to be governed by the government, but establish self-governing. And with agentic AI and with the ability of self-reasoning improving over time, would you envision that this self-governance would be on AI level itself, built into the system, rather than waiting for that for the company to create that self-governance? Thank you.
Look, it's a really good question, and I think the Californian legislators have done some interesting work in relation to ownership. So AI and AI ownership still comes back to an individual or a particular company. So from a regulator's perspective, there is always someone or an entity that is accountable for the product or the use of the product. I think that's important. In relation to its limitations, I think these are very, very good points that, government won't understand agentic AI in the way that the developers do. So it must come from them in relation to what are the frameworks that keep people safe, what are the limitations in relation to the decision making, and when is human intervention needed. Now, that's not to say that government won't come up with a framework over time, it will, but the point here is that industry should always prefer to come up with the framework first, that it can give to government or show regulators what, in relation to what it is, rather than having a situation where government is coming from a perspective and creating a regulatory framework that it doesn't fully understand.
And supported by ethical literacy, not just digital literacy, which is probably going to be the shift in skill set that we'll be seeing to support this.
Maybe if I could add to, I think to your question, right? Like when I look at what we do around those guardrails that I talked about, input-output validation, they're often smaller language models in combination with deterministic systems that basically keep it in check. So yes, 100%. The only way to scale this is by actually having a self-governing mechanism in place that you often fall back for agentic as well. The question is then how deep is it turtles all the way down in that case? And yeah, that's the bit that we're trying to work out. How many our guardrails around input-output validation, we've got probably 10 different models: profound language, privacy, jailbreaking, and so on. And they're all LLMs, small language models in combination with deterministic systems. So it's automated as much as possible.
Okay, please join me in thanking the panelists for their time and attention tonight.